In Matthew chapter 7, we see this very familiar verse. Judge not that you may not be judged. It says, judge not that you be not judged. For with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when there is a log in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. So we see here like Jesus speaking. I don't know if it's wordplay. He's speaking in like hyperbole. And he's saying here, speaking about correction, speaking about correcting somebody. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? He says, you're quick to point out the little sin in your brother, but look at all the sin that you're in. Look at your sin. It says, or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when there is a log in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Speaking, if one is in sin, how are they going to help their brother who is in sin? If one is in sin, they're not going to be very helpful to somebody who is in sin. But more than that, it's speaking about here a judgmentalism. It says, you cannot, how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your own eye, out of your eye, when there is a log in your own eye? You can't see. You can't see. But here, you may not see just the depth of what Christ is saying here. It speaks about a gentle correction as well. I can draw from here. We can draw from here. Because if we've taken the log out of our eye, then we can help our brother with a speck in his eye, right? That's what it's teaching as well. If I take the log out of my eye and I can see clearly, my discernment is good, I can discern a speck in my brother's eye, then I'll be able to help that brother. But just listen to what Jesus says. Let me take the speck out of your eye. Have you ever tried to take a speck out of someone's eye? It speaks about a gentleness, right? You cannot just jam your finger into their eye. You're going to do a lot of damage. Oh, let me take the speck out of your eye, and bam, you just, it talks about, sit down, don't move. Don't move. Let me help you. And gently, methodically, and tactfully take the speck out of the eye. It speaks about a carefulness and a gentleness in correcting a brother or a sister in sin. Taking that speck out of the eye very carefully, not to hurt, not to damage, right? That's what it speaks of. And we need to be gentle in our correction. We need to be gentle like that. Not bullies, not being bullies, not being wanting to seem self-righteous over other people, not correcting them in a way that Christ does not want us to, that it is not according to the spirit of gentleness and love. Jesus was a gentle man. He is an example for us. Remember what Matthew chapter 12 says about Jesus. Well, in Matthew 11 it says, come to me all those who are burdened and heavy laden, I will give you rest. For I am lowly, right? I am lowly and meek of heart. In Matthew 12:19 says this about Jesus, that he will not quarrel or cry aloud, nor will anyone hear his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break, a smoldering wick he will not quench. A bruised reed. A bruised reed is one that is almost broken, right? It's a reed that has been bruised, has been crushed, has been stepped on. It says a bruised reed he will not break. A wick, a smoldering wick, a flame in the lamp that's about to go out. He's not going to quench it. He's not going to put it out. Instead, maybe put more oil in it. Maybe just, protect it and keep it for the wind from putting it out. He will not quench. That is the kind of spirit, the kind of gentleness Christ has. That is how careful he is. He's all powerful. But true gentleness is powerful. Gentleness is power. Christ despises pride. And one beautiful, beautiful example is about how Jesus corrected his disciples. This is the most powerful man, God, in the universe. He is the Son of God, God the Son. In Luke 22, I think you all remember where James and John were asking about wanting to be great. It says in verse 24 of Luke 22:24, a dispute, an argument also arose among them as to which one of them was to be regarded as the greatest. So they were thinking Christ was going to be king and Messiah here on the earth, and they wanted to be the greatest. They wanted to have rule over people. Their concept of being servants was not fully developed. Their concept of being humble servants in the world was not fully developed. They had not grasped it yet with the example of Jesus Christ and everything that he did. But you know, that's how human beings are. We miss a lot of things. In Mark chapter 10, verse 37, James and John says, they said to him, to Jesus, grant us, Lord, grant us to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left in your glory. In your glory. One wanted to sit at the right hand of power and the other at the left hand of power next to Jesus Christ. They wanted to be in his inner circle as he was going to reign like the kings of the Old Testament. By sword, by power, by strength, by shedding blood. But that is not Christ. His kingdom is not of this world. If it was, his followers would fight, he says. After this, during this time, all these expressions of pride in his disciples, they went up to the upper room. They went up to the upper room. And they all were sitting there. What happens when someone goes to a house in the first century there? You know, they got the dust in their feet, right? Walking with the sandals, dust in their feet. So they're sitting there in the upper room in John chapter 13. You know what they didn't think about? What the disciples, I was thinking about this. One thing that none of the disciples thought about. They all wanted to be great. They all thought about asking Christ, I want to sit at your right hand. Can I be at your right hand? And can I be at your left so that I can rule and reign with you? When they were disputing about which one of them was going to be the greatest, they were thinking about power. They were thinking about ruling. They were thinking about being over and having dominion over people and a kingdom with Christ. They were thinking about power. The concept of servanthood had not yet developed. They had no idea. They were all up in the upper room. And one thing that none of them thought about was this. Who's going to wash our feet? You know, let's wash one another's feet. How about that? Or Peter say, hey, brothers, there's no servant here to wash our feet. Let me wash y'all's feet. I'll do it this time. None of them thought that. But Jesus, to teach them humility, what humility is and what being a part of the kingdom is, says in John 13:3, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given him all things into his hands and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. You see what it says? Jesus knowing in his heart, convinced because he knows. Jesus knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. Knowing that he is the almighty Son of God. Knowing that he was going to go back to the Father and share in the glory. That he was going to sit on the throne in heaven. Knowing who he is and what he was going to to go back to, it says that he rose up. He didn't scold them. It says he laid aside his outer garments and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with a towel that was wrapped around him. To correct them, to correct their pride, he took the lowliest position. Nobody was thinking, who's going to wash our feet? Maybe we should wash one another's feet. Jesus, knowing who he was, his identity, he had no shame, no embarrassment. He knows he's God. He knows that all things were handed to him and that he was going to go back to the Father. To correct them, he didn't scold them. Instead, what did he do? He undressed himself, put a towel, washed basin, and corrected them. You know the difference correcting somebody from a lowly place, from a place of humility, looking up to them and correcting them, washing their feet, teaching them about servanthood, about love, and about humility and meekness, and what the kingdom of God was going to be about, and how they were to be with one another, that they were to love one another as he has loved them. See, he wasn't on top of them correcting them, scolding them. No, instead, as a good brother, as a good teacher, to teach them about humility and how they are to deal with one another in washing and correcting one another. He takes a place of humility before them, and it's a looking up in love, washing their feet and teaching them of what it is to be a servant and what humility is and how the kingdom of God is going to operate. And that is what correction looks like in the Christian life. When a brother or a sister needs correcting, this needs to be the spirit that we have when we correct one another, when we come to one another with a grievance, when we come to and we notice a speck in the brother's eye. We need to be gentle, careful, and not blunt, not sharp, not crass, but loving and gentle, and have the Spirit of Christ of taking that position of the loneliness, lowly and holy. In Philippians